The Butterfly Dream. Once Zhuangzi in a dream turned into a butterfly. There was a butterfly joyfully fluttering about. It followed its whims exactly as it liked and knew not of a Zhou. Suddenly waking up, there was Zhou, fully there. One does not know if a Zhou in a dream turned into a butterfly, or if a butterfly in a dream turned into a Zhou. There was a Zhou, and there was a butterfly. So there surely was a separation. This is what is called the transformation of things. This is the most famous story of the Daoist text Zhuangzi, or Master Chuang, presumably dating back to the 3rd or 4th century BCE. It features Zhuangzi, the philosopher traditionally taken to be its author. However, neither this story nor the book is written from the perspective of a first-person narrator. Zhuangzi is, next to the butterfly, one of 2 characters from which the narrator is equally distant. There was a Zhou and there was a butterfly, says the text, stressing there surely was a separation. It is important to highlight the distance between the narrator and the character Zhuangzi because early English translations presented the text using the first person, I. In Herbert A. Giles' version, an I occurs 10 times, none of which has a literal counterpart in the Chinese original. The emphasis on the self in modern translations suggests that the story is about trying to find one's true self in a dreamlike world. Giles even translated the final sentence as, "The transition is called metempsychosis." Metempsychosis refers to the ancient Greek theory of the transmigration of the soul, the idea that one's individual soul is, after death, reincarnated in a different body. But this is not how the butterfly dream story was understood in early China. Interpretations of Daoist philosophy can resemble the food served in some Asian restaurants in the West. It looks exotic, like the image of a butterfly and an ancient Chinese wise man, but it tastes familiar, as the modern quest for authenticity, which also those not trained in philosophy know well from pop culture, advertising, or self-help instructions. Reading the story more literally, together with related stories in the Book of Zhuangzi, and in light of comments by Guoshang, who edited today's version of the text around 300 CE, 3 major meanings come to the fore: a philosophy of life and death, a reflection on being at ease, and a philosophy of identity. A philosophy of life and death. The story clearly points out at the end that the transition between being in a dream and being awake is meant to illustrate the transformation of things. The butterfly is an obvious image of this transformation. It undergoes the radical change from a crawling, earthbound caterpillar to a winged, flying creature. The story suggests that humans, too, can undergo such changes when dreaming. In dreams, we can have experiences that are entirely impossible in our waking life, such as being able to fly. As Guoshang says, the at times radical transition from our waking to our dreaming experience is comparable with the transition from life to death. While the transition from waking to dreaming is a small, nightly occurrence we are perfectly accustomed to, the big transition between life and death is more dramatic and happens less frequently. But it happens just as surely. When we die, a radical cut takes place, similar to when we enter a different form of existence in an intense dream, split apart from our usual life world. In the expression, "there surely was a separation," the character for separation includes the graphic symbol for knife. Another story in the Zhuangzi tells of 4 friends joking about how they will be transformed once they die. Maybe one's left arm will become a rooster crowing in the morning. The right arm may turn into a crossbow used for hunting birds. The buttocks may become a pair of wheels, and the mind may turn into a horse. In such stories in the Zhuangzi, unlike, for example, in Christianity, there is no assumption of an immortal soul being transported into an otherworldly heaven or hell after death. And unlike in Hinduism and other religions, there is no belief in an immaterial self that is reborn in different bodies. The butterfly dream story is an allegory of a more realistic and simple view of life and death as a process of transformation, where different bodily and mental shapes emerge and dissolve. A reflection on being at ease. The butterfly dream story is not just about understanding life and death as the transformation of things. It is also about the ability of being at ease. The joyfully fluttering butterfly symbolizes both transformation and happiness. Stories about death in the Chuangzi are often also about the relief from fear and sorrow. Shockingly, for mainstream Confucian culture in early China, which strongly emphasized the moral obligation to mourn the death of one's relatives for long periods of time, and probably still somewhat shocking for people today, the Zhuangzi promotes an affirmation of not only life, but also of death, the welcoming of natural transformations. Before imagining his strange mutations after death, one of the four friends says, "What should I dislike about it?" The changes he envisions as his buttocks becoming a pair of wheels and his mind a horse running about are light-hearted and humorous. Almost therapeutically, such stories transform worry into ease. The butterfly dream story suggests, relax. Just as you may turn into a butterfly tonight in your dream, you may transform after death into a new existence that can be content in its own way. Many religions and philosophies provide elaborate answers to the unanswerable question of what happens after death. Quite frequently, these answers do little to alleviate the fear of death, probably the most fundamental of all human anxieties. Instead, they often make use of this fear to intimidate people and to implement systems of discipline. Some, like Christianity, threatened eternal punishment of heathens in hell to discourage anyone from abandoning faith. Others, like Confucianism, imposed a strict regime of mourning the dead and venerating ancestral spirits to enforce firm obedience of the younger to the older generation. Stories dealing with death in the Zhuangzi subvert belief systems that cultivate the fear of death to control people's emotions and behavior. The butterfly dream story tries to free people from worries about death by pointing out the fact we neither know the transformations that preceded our existence, nor those that will follow it. The butterfly in the dream does not know about Chuang, and as Guoshang says, Chuang does not remember his dream once he is awake and fully there. To frankly admit such non-knowledge can give people a break from powerful but unrealistic belief systems. To be at ease, one needs to get rid of fears that often stem from unfounded beliefs, and especially from unfounded beliefs about death. A philosophy of identity. The butterfly in the story follows its whims exactly as it liked. In an intense dream, we experience reality just about as realistically as when we are awake. Of course, what happens in a dream is imagined, but our mind still thinks and feels, and our body is alive. We have actual emotions and physical reactions in a dream. In an erotic dream, for instance, the people we interact with are unreal, but our mental and bodily experiences nevertheless take place. When having a nightmare, we actually sweat and our heart runs fast. In this regard, dreams are real, and in this sense, the joy of the butterfly in the dream is genuine. The butterfly's intense experience of joy in the dream has to do with the fact that there is no knowledge of Cho. If the butterfly in the dream remembered Cho, the flying experience would probably be less intense and real. In this case, the genuineness of experience, or the experience of genuineness, depends on not questioning one's identity, on not bothering about one's transformations. Paradoxically, the experience of identity is a genuine pretense. In dreams, or in child play, or in art, we genuinely identify with a persona we transformed into, and will transform out of again. A persona that is not our authentic self, but a temporary construct. Is this so only in dreams, in child play, or in art? The sentence, "One does not know if a Cho in a dream turned into a butterfly, or if a butterfly in a dream turned into a Cho," suggests that the same paradoxical logic of identity also applies to life in general. That Chuang Cho is fully there depends on him neither knowing nor worrying about the transformations that one's mind and body are subject to, on a daily basis in dreams, but also with regard to all the changes we undergo in our lives, and more radically, before and after. The experience of identity of both the butterfly and Chuang Cho are not mere illusions. They actually take place and are equally intense. They are not the same, of course. There surely is a separation. In both cases, however, to fully be a butterfly or a Cho, under the very different conditions of dreaming and being awake, is to identify not with a true self, but with a temporary and contingent state in the midst of unknown transformations.